is June 23rd, 2021. It's a low tide. We're at Salt Creek in Clallam County. As you can see, there are tide pools all over, and we're going down to see what's in them.
Here we have our first little crawling creature. It's a tiny little crab. He's hanging out now that he spotted me, but there's another one who just flipped over right here. And he too is, oh, he's moving nicely. Lateral crab walk. Of course, he's not in an actual pool, which is where the interesting things are supposed to be found.
There's a particular kind of mollusk that grows down here. Apparently, it's the very large species of them.
But you can see, you really have to pick your way along these rocks very carefully. Just saw another little crab shoot down into there. Tiny little creatures all finding a way to survive.
Here's Chris and Bonnie already down there on the beach, photographing the low tide and the tide pools.
Plenty of barnacles here. Many of the barnacles get scraped off because trees end up falling into the streams and coming down the streams and then end up in the strait and then get bashed up against the rocks.
It's about 7 in the morning. Oh geez, look at that. This was all filled up with water last night.
We're clambering over here. There's another one I'm following.
That's Vancouver Island over there. This is the Strait of Juan de Fuca.
Now, of course, crabs like to be in water. And there's a little one that was in motion right there. So this is a very minor tide pool. Oh, I think I see one there. Let's zoom in on him a little bit. Yeah, clambering away underwater on the eternal quest for something to eat. Seems to be life. Of course, the bulk of the life here is aquatic plants. Suddenly bereft of support from the water around them, they all collapse into little piles, little slippery piles. You have to be very careful walking over. There's an island of yesterday right straight ahead of us, but today it's now part of the mainland. And I'm wondering if you circumambulate it, whether or not there's a way to get up to the top. Pinkish area here. I'm not sure what it is. Probably minerals. If we probe away at it a little bit, we can get near it. Boy, this stuff is slippery. No, it's definitely mineral. Right there, it's not rubbing. But yeah, that's an intriguing color. Okay, well, after walking over the slippery mass of aquatic plants, approaching a base of what is normally an island. Seriously eroded, battered by the tides, the flow of the water currents, guarded prodigiously by all kinds of aquatic, slippery aquatic plants. Barnacles here. Quite a few barnacles, some tide pools. Huge separated boulder. Now let's take a look here. We're actually walking on sand, of course. Here's a little tide pool in the sand. Let's see if we can see a starfish or other interesting marine life. Lots of broken shells, remnant aquatic plants. I see some motion right down there in the water. They are very good at not making themselves visible. They're not in motion. I think that's our little fellow right there into the water. Wow, several creatures, I would think. Look at that. Obviously they found something to feed on. Look like they have shells on their backs. It'd be nice if we had a little more definition through the water. Those are shelled creatures. Maybe some kind of a crab that occupies a shell. Several of them. They wouldn't be hanging out there if they weren't chewing on something. We'll leave them to their meal. Here we are. Continuing around. We're now connected to the mainland island. And if there was any place to mount the island, you'd expect it to be on this side. At least I would expect. But no, short of some real serious ropage, climbing skills, very unlikely to be able to mount the island from here. It's starting to look a little more promising from this side, which would actually be, I suspect, since it's the western face of the island. Seems to be a little bit of an escarpment right here. Ahead of me. Guarded by barnacles. There's some slippery seaweed at my feet. Well, right before me, I'll show you where I came up from. Here's that escarpment. And the barnacles made traction with sneakers. Very straightforward to get to this point. But right before me, if I were a very industrious climber, I think there's a possibility of some clambering over these very painful rocks. An adept use of the hands would lead to first rising up to that shelf and may be going along the lip to get to the top of the island. But what I'm going to do is just proceed over to the tide line over where the waves are right now and see what the face of the island looks like from this more westerly direction, focusing on this particular little ascent. Well, as far as I can tell now, the tide is definitely coming back. And here's where I was at the end of that little starfish. And you can get a sense that a skilled climber, not myself, might be able to rise from there, make a little route to this point here, this notch, and then be able to project themselves up to the top of the island to join those trees and have a look at the Salt Creek area. Very green, very sculpted, beautiful long beach. And on to Peninsula mainland right there. I'm now about to sneak up at what I would consider the only person that I know who might be an expert. What's going on here? What did you find?
I have no clue.
Yeah, there might be a kelp with a holdfast. You see the kelp, which is these big brown seaweeds here, and they're actually algae. They're like the largest and most structurally complex algae in the world. And but because they're algae, they don't have real roots. They have these things called holdfasts, which are specialized cells for holding them onto the rock. And because the holdfasts are down in crevices in the rock, they don't need to have any chlorophyll or anything like that in them, so they're white.
So did you discover anything of particular interest, Chris?
Yeah, a bunch of cool stuff.
Any starfish?
Oh, and I found some giant barnacles over there.
Giant
I
barnacles?
found this chunk of barnacle rock that was the size of my fist.
Uh-huh.
And it was made of only 4 barnacles.
Uh-huh.
And then I noticed they were still alive. They were moving around.
Oh. You know what I found?
So
A bunch
must have just got broken off very recently.
The most interesting thing I found was a bunch of crabs that somehow put on shells and they were attacking something and eating. It must have been 4 or 5 of these crabs all eating something at once. That was about it.
Well, you know, they're carnivorous.
Yeah, everybody's got to eat, right?
And the main thing that crabs eat is smaller crabs.
Thus, great crabs eat smaller crabs, and smaller crabs that bite smaller crabs, and so on infinitum, right?
Yeah, so we're not going to turn that into a poem.
No, because it's supposed to.
Do you know what this is?
Yeah, it's part of a sea urchin. If you
Oh,
go
that's
out a little
cool.
bit farther, you see there's zillions of them. They carve out little shells for themselves in the rock, or they find little shells that fit the sea urchins perfectly. They're about the size of tennis balls, and they have long purple spines.
So they're actually an animal.
They are an animal. They are an echinoderm, which is the phylum of animals that is most closely related to vertebrates.
So did we evolve out of anything that resembled that 500, 600 million years ago?
Well, there's a big fight about that that's been going on for about 200 years, and you can join the fight if you want to.
Oh, okay, I'll just have to put on some soft gloves so nobody
Personally,
gets
I'll wait
hurt.
until the genetic studies clear out. But the funny thing is that they actually do have like a protobackbone and bilateral symmetry when they're larvae. And then when they grow into adults, they develop this 5-fold symmetry that we see in starfish, and they lose anything resembling a backbone.
So the starfish evolved out of something that was more along the line.
This is the neotenous theory of vertebrate origin, which is that we evolved like something that looked a lot like larval echinoderms.
Described by Lacey is a sea urchin. Now, do we know if that's a living thing, isn't it, an urchin?
Yeah.
I mean, an animal, not a plant.
Yeah. And it has all the little spines
It
on it
has little
still.
spines on it, so it's probably constantly absorbing nutrients out of the water.
And I don't know what this part is.
That's probably the most living part of it, right? Maybe it's
Yeah.
its legs. It's got a shell, and it does have. This one's, of course, now all desiccated. But wow,
That's awesome.
okay, we discovered another urchin here, we believe, and this one's green in color. Now I don't know. This one feels. It's alive. Did you see how it responded when I touched it? Wow. Discovered a submerged urchin, and if you look at it, you'll see that all those spines around the side are spread out to encompass as much of a perimeter as possible to gather up food. Whereas the ones that were exposed to the air had collapsed in and withdrawn all their extensions. And like the other one, this one's green, and clearly it's alive. Wow, nice catch. You're a good observer. Here is like a little puddle of something. And I'm not sure what it is, but it's certainly alive, but it doesn't have the thousands of hundreds of projections on it. But it certainly responds to contact. It's a living thing, obviously an animal of some kind. I wish I could name it. What did you find over here? This purple thing?
Yeah, it's a full sea urchin.
Oh, it's another urchin, but it's fully folded up. But you know what? It's solidified. It's non-responsive. So our speculation is that they turn purple when they die because some chemical is withdrawn from their extensions. Well, that was the green, remember?
And then the red ones are just a different kind.
Oh, okay, so the red ones are confirmed to be alive. They're not, and this one's fully extended, so that pretty much shoots down the idea that they're the same species, living or dead, and they withdraw
They're
some
the same species, they're just in a different subspecies.
Subspecies.
Class or whatever you call it.
Okay.
Didn't it sting you?
Yeah, I did get kind of stung by one. I was trying to pull a shell off of it.
Well, this is definitely urchin heaven here.
Yeah, there's not even many here. You go over around on the other side.
Yeah, we just haven't been stuck in the
Okay, so we clarified that mystery. We were only finding dead purple ones. We weren't finding dead green ones, but apparently they're just maybe more susceptible to exposure, the purple and orange ones. That's our speculation in the matter. So now we're at the very limits of the rock formations that project out in to the bay here, Salts Creek area. I'm about to turn in because the tide is soon going to advance, but there's a seabird, undoubtedly a gull. View. Back to the island, the north face. This is the sandy part of the beach. There's the point right ahead of us. Strait of Juan de Fuca, as you can see distantly. Vancouver Island, which stretches pretty much along the same length of the northern coast of the Olympic Peninsula. Turning once again to our gull friend, preening itself on the rock. Here we have some of the few beachcombers. Several of which we know and love.